Tonight, we venture into the shadowy corridors of Universal Studios, a place that gave birth to some of horror's most iconic creatures. Ah, yes, Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, the mummy, the Wolfman. Their names have echoed through the ages, but what about those other Universal horrors? The ones that were overshadowed? The films that time has cruelly forgotten?
Yeah, you always hear about the big names, but wasn't Universal cranking out horror films left and right back then?
Oh, indeed, Jody. In the 1930s, 40s, and even the 50s, Universal was the undisputed master of macabre. But not every monster got its time in the moonlight. Some films were lost to time, buried under the weight of their more successful siblings. So, tonight, we resurrect those forgotten creatures and unearth the lost Universal monster films. Prepare yourself for a journey through the celluloid crypts of obscurity. Let's begin with a film so rarely spoken of that even I had to scour the graveyards of forgotten cinema to find it. The Man Who Reclaimed His Head from 1934. Now, you would think that with a title like that, we'd have a glorious headless horror, a grotesque tale of revenge and reanimation. But no, this is a psychological horror tale starring the great Claude Rains, the very man who would become the legendary Invisible Man just 1 year later.
Wait, so no actual reanimated heads? Oh, false advertising, Uncle Vincent.
No patience, dear boy. This was a war horror film, one where political betrayal and madness collide. It tells the story of a pacifist writer who, after being used by corrupt politicians, quite literally loses his mind, both figuratively and, shall we say, in a very real way. It was grim, chilling, and unlike any other Universal horror film of the time, and yet it's nearly forgotten today. Next, my ghastly guest, let us unearth Night Monster, a 1942 film that was clearly inspired by the success of Universal's big hitters, but never quite reached their heights. A lesser-known gem, but filled with eerie atmosphere, and more importantly, a phantom-like killer who materializes from thin air.
So it's like The Invisible Man, but not?
No, not quite, dear Jody. This was a film drenched in gothic horror, starring Bela Lugosi himself, not as Dracula, but as a sinister butler. Now, you may be thinking, a butler? Oh, how terrifying. But this film had something more, a supernatural twist. It featured an unvalidated aristocrat who, through the power of mysticism, may or may not be regenerating his own limbs and committing murder.
That actually sounds kind of awesome. So why didn't this one blow up?
Oh, well, it was overshadowed by the greatest monster sequel of all time. With Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, poor Night Monster was lost to history, confined to the shadows of the Universal vaults. Ah, my dear creatures of the night, now we come to a film that should have been a Universal classic, The Mad Ghoul from 1943. This film has murder, love, and science gone horribly wrong.
Let me guess, another mad scientist experiment that totally backfires.
Oh, Jody, my dear boy, you understand the genre so well. This time, we have a doctor obsessed with ancient Mayan death rituals who turns his assistant into an undead ghoul, forced to do his bidding. Imagine Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde with a touch of the mummy. Except nobody remembers it. More like a touch of amnesia.
I mean, it's got all the right elements. What happened?
It lacked a marketable monster. The film had eerie makeup, but the ghoul himself never became an icon like the Wolfman or the Mummy. A pity, really. It had such potential. Finally, we reach a film so underrated that even most horror historians forget it exists. The Strange Door from 1951. This gothic chiller starred Boris Karloff himself, but instead of playing the monster, he was a tortured servant. A role beneath him, you say? Aha! But that's what makes it so compelling.
So, What's this one about?
Jody, it's about a deranged nobleman locks his own brother in a dungeon for 20 years while psychologically torturing his niece. A story of revenge, madness, and one of the darkest gothic horror tales Universal ever made. Yet, sadly, it has fallen into obscurity. So, my ghoulish guest, why did these films fade into the fog while Dracula and Frankenstein reign supreme? Well, several reasons. No iconic monsters. Unlike Dracula and Frankenstein and the Wolfman, these films lacked a truly unique monster that could stand the test of time. Though they were also overshadowed by sequels, Universal kept churning out sequels to their biggest hits, leaving little room for new creatures to take the spotlight. Oh, and then it was lost in the archives. Some of these films became difficult to find, buried in the vaults of time.
So what you're saying is, if these movies had a guy in a mask or a big scary monster, we'd still be talking about it.
Oh, indeed, my dear boy. But that is why we must remember them. Horror history is filled with forgotten gems, and if we don't keep their legacy alive, they shall vanish into the abyss. So, tell us, dear viewers, have you seen any of these lost Universal horror films? Or is there another obscure terror from the past that deserves resurrection? Let us know in the comments below.
And make sure to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell, or Uncle Vincent will probably summon a ghost to haunt you.
Jody, don't be ridiculous. I only summon spirits on Tuesdays. Until next time, my fiendish followers, stay spooky.